Namco.
One of the most prolific arcade game manufacturers of all time, responsible for Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Rally X, and countless other potential video topics. But what if you don't want to pump a quarter into an old pizza place's arcade corner every time you want your Super Pac-Man fix? For a while there, Namco's go-to solution were the home ports. These varied pretty heavily in quality and console, but overall did their job pretty well. But as technology advanced into the PS1 era, proper source ports and emulation were finally a prospect for arcade ports, and companies ran with this idea hard. Taito, Midway, and Atari all had arcade compilations on the PS1, but the most notable manufacturer of CD-based quarter muncher sims was Namco. The Namco Museum series is a long-running and, in my opinion, near-perfect collection of Namco's many hits over the years. And to say their beginnings weren't spectacular is a huge understatement. The Namco Museum series began on the PS1, consisting of 6 separate volumes released from 1995 to 1997. Only 2 are widely available in the US for cheap, even though 5 of the 6 were released here, those being Volume 1 and 3. And for good reason too, as these discs consist of some of the most popular games from Namco's history. Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Dig Dug, and Pole Position are easily the highlights of these 2 discs. However, the other 4 discs also have some solid games, Xevious, Gapless, and Mappy, just to name a few. These PS1 compilations are unique as they are some of the most faithful ports of the arcade games you can get, period. Namco ported all of these games to the PS1 based off their original source code, which means there's no emulation-based quirks to be found. These are the authentic arcade experiences through and through, and for extra bonus points you can even flip your monitor over for some classic tape mode action for games that support it. I wouldn't do this with an actual CRT though, you could damage it. While Volume 6, known as Encore, never came to the West, all of these are great ways to experience Namco history, though you really only need Volumes 1 and 3. Those have the best of Namco's arcade history and are dirt cheap. In the advent of the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, Namco outsourced the brand to a porting and emulation house called Mass Media, who handled many of the console releases for this generation. Namco Museum on the GameCube and PS2 marked a turn to straight emulation for the series as opposed to porting from source, which is probably cheaper but can lead to weird quirks. This game doesn't play the games half badly in terms of logic and graphics, but the sound kinda stinks, and in general there are far better ways to play these games on these platforms. Namely, Namco Museum 50th Anniversary. This packs a huge body count of Namco classics, including some oft-forgotten picks like Pac-Mania and Galaga 88, all emulated to a decently well-done degree. Namco Museum 50 was handled by Digital Eclipse, and it emulates the games pretty well, but the graphics are very squished looking, and the options don't do much to mitigate this. This is because they fit the vertical games to the PS2's video output of 640x480, which doesn't really look the best. Overall though, you really can't go wrong with this release. They even brought this game to PC, which doesn't often happen with Namco Museum games. Let's take a handheld deviation. Namco Museum has a solid few excursions on handhelds, and to talk about them, I'd like to welcome Internet Ivan to the stage. Ivan?
Namco Museum on the Game Boy Advance. 3 words, small and odd. Now, first off, let's take a good look at the games that even came bundled in with the collection. We got Ms. Pac-Man. Alright, not bad I guess. Pole Position? Have many people even played that game before, let alone heard of it? Anyways, let's take another look-see here. Dig Dug, Galaga, both great well-known Namco titles, and Galaxian? Yeah, the game library honestly wasn't that great in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, these games are all great on their own, but isn't it a bit odd how we have 2 games with the same objective, a game which is meant to be a spin-off of Namco's most iconic title ever made, and a racing game that's not as widely known? If the developers were going to have such a small library due to the GBA's small cartridge size, why couldn't they include more of the most popular titles so that there's more to play? I always found that to be a bit odd because I really don't see many people talking about Pole Position as much as Rally X. It probably would have also sold more copies of the collection too. Well, I guess there isn't much to complain about sales figure wise since this is surprisingly the 8th most sold Game Boy Advance game. It's also a bit weird how we have Ms. Pac-Man instead of the original game. I guess the reason for this was because Namco decided to release a collection of pure Pac-Man games later on. Though I do have to admit, these games run very well on the Game Boy Advance, especially Pole Position. This game is literally the only thing I can play on my Game Boy Advance, and I've yet to find any hiccups or drops in these games. Though, there are most definitely a few compromises. The audio does sound a bit wonky since it's played on a smaller speaker, and I think the worst compromise would be the display, just like any other GBA game. Almost every game on here is played on a very dark screen like Galaga or Miss Pac-Man, so even if you're playing this in a lit room, it could be hard to see what you're doing. Of course, this is only if you're playing on the AGB model like me. Not to mention the sprites being as small as an ant, so you can barely even see where your bullets are going in Galaga. But if you're playing Miss Pac-Man, you can choose to have a version of the map all spread out, or have it scroll up and down, similar to Super Mario Bros. 2 on the NES. It really seemed that they had tried to water this version down for the GBA's small memory and screen, but it was really beat out by the game collection and dark screen. I honestly wouldn't recommend picking this collection up if you're playing this on a first edition GBA, but maybe if you want to play, say, Galaga or Dig Dug on a cute little backlit screen, then by all means go for it. I can only imagine how good this collection would look on a modded IPS screen. But if you want to have a full experience of any of the games on here, look somewhere else please. But if you want to play something that can kill, say, 10 minutes, go for it. Overall, I have very mixed thoughts on this, and I am a bit nostalgic for it since, like I mentioned earlier, this is the only game I have for the GBA.
Well, having done some direct capture, I can confirm the graphics do look a lot better when you're not playing on an AGP 001. I personally think that the Game Boy Advance Namco Museum ain't half bad myself, and while the emulation ain't the best thing I've ever played, it does the trick pretty well. I will quickly say that I disagree with your statement that the game lineup isn't great though. No OG Pac-Man's super weird, yeah, but Miss Pac-Man's so much better anyways, so no real loss. And hey, you get Galaga, Dig Dug, and Galaxian too. There's definitely worse. Continuing on the Nintendo handheld tangent, the DS version of Namco Museum is, in my opinion, one of the greats in this series. The emulation was handled by famed porting house M2, who's done every incredibly well done emulation package you probably ever played. All of the bundled games run and play exactly as you'd expect, with one really unfortunate flaw that's out of M2's control. You have to play them on DS.
The DS version of this collection is honestly the best in my opinion as well. I was always fond of how crisp the pixels were on Nintendo DS games, and seeing this collection be played on the DS's bright, pixel-perfect display was pure eye candy. And unlike the GBA's version, the title of the collection is balanced out very well. The menus are also very smooth too. They never felt sluggish, and each game loaded up very quick. Some people have said things about cramps with the clamshell design, but honestly, I haven't had any problems with it since I was always used to the form factor. In my opinion, it's a great collection, and I don't have many bad things to say about it.
I totally agree on the graphics front. On original hardware, this game looks beautiful. It isn't as nice in my direct footage, but it's all really good overall and very arcade accurate. While I think this game's controls can cramp me up on an original DS, that shouldn't distract you from the sheer quality you get from this museum release. It's amazing. Overall, the Namco Museums that came to Nintendo handhelds are shockingly some very solidly made experiences. Good work, guys. Let's wrap this video up with two of the best releases in this series, and the few times the series has shown itself in recent years. Namco Museum Virtual Arcade is still one of the best in the series, being an Xbox 360 ROM that brought a whopping 34 games on one disc. This game is unique because it actually bundles a mix of original emulations and Xbox Live Arcade releases on the same disc. Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, and Galaga, among a few other games, are actually the Live Arcade versions, which is something I've always found odd. They emulate the vast majority of available games on this disc, but just decided to use the pre-existing Live Arcade releases for the ones that were eligible. Was it really that hard to just emulate the other games? The emulation for the other games, referred to as museum games, is pretty decent. The screen size is a bit small for my liking, but all the games look, control, and sound fine. The Xbox Live Arcade games, bundled, all work as you'd expect. Overall, this is a really cheap collection, but you get a ton of games on one pretty cheap disc. While it's not Xbox One backwards compatible, if you can play it, I wholeheartedly recommend. Speaking of recommendations, we have the magnum opus of Namco Museum. The unoriginally named Namco Museum released on the Nintendo Switch in 2017. This is the closest any Namco Museum release has ever gotten to arcade perfect. The game selection is a few of the shoo-ins like Pac-Man, Galaga, and Dig Dug, however also has its fair share of deep cuts. Games like Rolling Thunder 1 and 2, Galaga 88, Tank Force, which is actually a sequel to Battle City, and the ever-incredible Splatterhouse are included too. Every game looks and plays incredibly, and while the collection is a bit overpriced at $40 US, it is a pretty widely available physical bundle with Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 Plus and often goes on sale. It's a no-brainer for any arcade fan, new or old. It's absolutely the best you can get. So overall, the Namco Museum games are pure bliss for me. This series was my introduction to iconic games like Galaga 88, Pac-Mania, Dig Dug, and more. While I had played many of these games in arcades my family visited, being able to play them whenever I wanted was truly a power trip. Someday I'll actually own an original arcade cabinet from one of these games, but until then, I've got some great ways to play them without quarter use. And for the ones I can't, I've always got MAME. Thanks to Internet Ivan for showing up in this video, by the way. Keep an eye out for something on his channel soon. We've got things in the works.
Yes, most definitely. Look forward to more to come. Also, make sure to check out my new TikTok and Twitch for more content other than on the YouTube channel. Hope you guys have a good one.
You're not getting your stupid handheld guru joke, dude.